I'm kind of stalling a little bit here. This has got to be, so far, the hardest passage I've run into in Job. And even with Dr. Ruckman, I'm just like, turn to Job chapter 28. Job chapter 28. And I'm going to read you the first 6 verses. Now, if anything jumps out at you, just raise your hand. It says, moreover, Job continued his... Well, that's not it. Where am I at? I'm in 29. Okay. That's why it didn't make no sense. Okay. Chapter 28, verse 1. Surely there is a vein for the silver and a place for gold where they find it. Iron is taken out of the earth and brass is molten out of the stone. He setteth an end to darkness. He searcheth out all perfection, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. The flood breaketh out from the inhabitant, even the waters forgotten of the foot. They are dried up, they are gone away from men. As for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it is turned up as it were fire. The stones of it are a place of sapphires, it hath dust of gold. Anything jump out at you? Me neither. After reading what Dr. Ruckman had to say about it, it kind of, all of a sudden, it kind of, something kind of formed before my eyes. But so this is a tough passage. It really is. Now, let's remember this is a parable. He says, he continued the parable. He's still continuing this same parable. In fact, 29:1, moreover, Job continued his parable and said, and we know that this is a parable about the Great Tribulation. So, having those two things in mind, spotting things that stick out, that you know there are other verses of Scripture in the Bible that deal with those things, and I think you'll see something here in a minute. The first thing is the context of this is refining gold. Refining gold. And the place where it happens. The place is earth because that's where the Great Tribulation takes place. Now, who do you think the gold is? Yeah. Look at Job 23:10. We had covered this. Job 23:10. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Job is a type of the remnant of Israel. So he's talking about trying them. He's talking about a place where it's going to happen, and a place for gold where they find it. Look at Malachi chapter 3. Malachi chapter 3, look at verse 2 and 3. He says, but who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. One refines it down to a pure substance. The other one gets it white. Fuller's soap cleanses. And he shall sit as a refiner and a purifier of silver. He shall purify the sons of Levi and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. So there's going to be a lot of purifying going on in the tribulation. Actually, it's been going on a very long time. Okay. Look what's mentioned here in these 2 verses, the first 2. 4 metals are mentioned, which match Daniel chapter 2. Did you see that? You've got gold, silver, you've got iron, or you got brass and you got iron. Those represent those kingdoms. And he even mentions, because the bottom of that image is those toes mixed with clay. But notice what he says there, verse 5, as for the earth, there's your clay. So you've got everything mentioned there. Now I tell you what I draw from this. I draw from this that God used those kingdoms all the way back from Nebuchadnezzar, all the way through, he used those as refining, to refine the children of Israel. And he's still doing that. That thing begins with Babylon and it ends with Rome. which is just another, it's just Babylon all over again is what it is. But it ends with Rome, and Rome is carried all the way through. And he's been purifying that Jew with these kingdoms, or refining them. So he says in verse 3, he setteth an end to darkness, and searcheth out all perfection, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. Well, we know that shadow of death connected with the tribulation. We've talked about it, of what it could be, and even something supernatural in the tribulation that could cast a shadow that kills people. But it says he setteth an end to darkness. You know, for Israel, you got to remember, until 1948, it had been 2,500 years. You're talking 2 millennia and 500 years, 2.5 millennia, before they ever became a nation again, and they still don't have a king or a priest. So even at the time when Christ comes, they're under the heel of Rome, and they're not self-governing. So 2,500 years, and you know what you would ask? Is there ever going to be an end to this? And the Lord said, he setteth an end to darkness. There's going to be an end to it. In fact, we're told, we're even given the timeline to this end. So it's going to come to an end. I know sometimes I feel that way. I feel like, is the rapture ever going to get here? Is this ever going to come to an end? What have we got to face until it happens? I mean, it's not that I've been waiting that long, but I've been expecting what seems to be coming now 10 years ago. So you say, will it come? I don't know. All I know is be a little bit more prepared than you were yesterday. And just know this, that if it does all fall apart on us, if it does, the world turns upside down, at least we know the end is near. That's good in itself. So, Job chapter 10, verse 21 and 22, he says, before I go hence, I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death, a land of darkness as darkness itself, and the shadow of death without any order, and where the light is as darkness. I mean, a lot of darkness is in those chapters, or in those verses there. One of the things that Job did not have that you and I did, he did not have, well, at least he didn't know he was eternally secure. Now, if he was, it doesn't say it, but Israel itself is using a works and faith salvation in the tribulation. And to be honest with you, Job doesn't know what's going on, and he doesn't know whether he's going to wake up in hell or not. He says there that he setteth an end to darkness and searcheth out all perfection. Is God's searching for something. And a verse came to my mind in Matthew 13:44. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like unto treasure hid in a field, which when a man hath found, he hideth. Not treasure, the Lord hid. And for joy thereof goeth and selleth all that he hath and buyeth that field. The Lord's got a treasure here, okay? And he's going to be coming back for it. And he's looking for anything precious, refined, clean, like the Fuller soap. He'll be looking for that. 2 Corinthians 4:7 says about us, but we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. And that is that one day when the Lord brings us home, there is something inside of us. The world doesn't see it. The world doesn't see it, but it's God's treasure. I mean, His Son is in each one of us. That's God's treasure. And we're being conformed to the image of His Son. At least we should be in that process. And one of these days, He's going to call that treasure home. And He'll be doing the same in the tribulation, the great tribulation. He's going to be looking for treasure. He's going to be trying everything. Everything will be tried. Every man and woman on this earth will be tried, whether it falls into the darkness or not. But it says He setteth an end to darkness, and I don't know if I can read the latter part of the verse. He setteth an end to darkness, the stones of darkness and the shadow of death. that those things come to an end. It may be, though, that he says he searcheth out all perfection, that he's searching out everything, even the evil. Verse 4 says, the flood breaketh out from the inhabitant, even the waters forgotten of the foot. They are dried up, they are gone away from men. And I think this is just another reference to the Genesis flood. Remember, that is the closest cataclysmic event that Job can draw on. It's several hundred years after the flood that he can draw on that. Genesis 7:11 says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And what this ends up being is, and I'm going by Dr. Ruckman's calculation, I didn't do the actual math myself, but it ends up being 370 days that no man walked on the earth due to it being covered in water. So that's what he means there, even the waters forgotten of the foot. Now, if you got anything better than that, speak up, because I don't. I mean, forgotten of the foot because no foot had been walking on that earth for a long time. Anybody got any on that? Make any sense out of it? Okay. So it says, they are dried up, they are gone away from men. Genesis 8:13 says, it came to pass in the 600th and first year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Now, I'm not sure what the point of the verse is. I'm not sure. I can give you a guess, but I don't know if I'm right. I'm not sure what it's saying. I think I know what it's talking about in that Genesis flood, but I don't know what the point is. But maybe the point is that once a disaster disappears, men quickly forget till the next one shows up. I don't know. I know that seems to be, 9/11 happened, 20 years ago? And they've already forgotten that. Oh, they commemorate and do this and do that, but I mean, it's so hard for me to understand that I'm looking at a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old and they weren't even alive yet when that happened. That just blows my mind. Because it doesn't seem like it's been that long ago that it happened. I think that's what it is. I think the older you get, the more you experience and you see that, man, it changes you. It changes your outlook on life, period. There are some people that think that everybody wants to get along and sing kumbaya and hug and love one another. They just don't know. You've been around a while, you realize the wickedness of people, how wicked and cruel they can be. And then you realize that you could be the one on the receiving end of that wickedness. And then all of a sudden you're out buying guns and going to the range. And why? Because you're fearful of what's out there. And the rest of them fools have no idea. They have no clue until it happens to them, by the way. And that's what's going to happen. Anyway, that's the best I can do with verse 4. And I'm not going to do much better with the rest of the chapter, or at least what I'm covering tonight. Verse 5, it says, as for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it is turned up as it were fire. Okay, well, practically speaking, wheat, barley, corn, and rye, etc., come from the earth. That's how we make bread. Comes from the earth. Prophetically speaking, turn to Luke chapter 4, verse 3. Somebody believes you can get bread from rocks. Luke 4:3, and the devil said unto him, if thou be the Son of God, command this stone that it be made bread. Why would he ask that? Because there's prophecy back there that he's going to feed and nourish the children of Israel in the wilderness. This just came into mind. Something about if he asked for a stone Or if you ask for bread, will he give you a stone? Huh? I just thought of that one. So somebody's asking for bread, and they're getting bread, and it looks like he just... Now, I thought about when this might happen. Now, we know that the manna comes down. I mean, it talks about the manna coming down. It's a picture that the manna comes down. But what happens when the Lord shows up at a mid-trib appearance at Selah Petra, the place of the rock? And they need bread. You're going to turn the stones to bread and feed them. And the devil's trying to get him to do that before the time. Always the right thing. The devil always wants you to do the right thing at the wrong time. And that's what he wanted from the Lord. Revelation 12:14 says, "And to the women were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness." I said woman, not women, or it should be woman. That she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, a times, and a half a time from the face of the serpent. So there's even some. You talk about some verses that'll just make your mind explode. There's one out there we talk about breaking the head of Leviathan and feeding the children of Israel. And if you think about a dragon that is an aquatic being, scale talks about his scales over there. We'll be covering that. But that scale also looks a little bit like that coriander seed, that manna. Which you know what manna means, right? What is it? Huh? It's angel's food, but what is it? And this is where this is taking place. In Lamentations 4:21, it says, "Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, that dwelleth in the land of Uz." And that's where they're going to be holed up. They're going to be holed up in the land of Edom, and it's a Selah Petra, the place of the rock. And that's where they're going to be holed up, and God's going to feed them. The rest of the world will probably be starving, and these folks will be fed every day. Isaiah 33:16. Turn there. Isaiah 33:16. "He shall dwell on high. His place of defense," look at this, "shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him." Right after the rocks, bread shall be given him. His water shall be sure. God is going to provide the water they need, and He's going to... Remember, you can smite the rock, and out comes what? Okay. They'll probably speak to the rock, by the way. First time they smote the rock. Second time they speak to the rock. They won't get it wrong like Moses did. So they speak to that rock, and all of a sudden here comes water. Next thing you know, they need bread, and I don't know who's turning it into bread except the Lord Himself. And He's giving them bread to eat. Their munitions are the rocks. Somehow they're protected there in that place. And I saw a documentary on it, and it's pretty huge overall. And the way into that thing is there's this curvy corridor that you probably couldn't walk 2 people side by side in there. But once you got in there, man, it spread out, and you had those facades up that look like, but they go back a ways. But there's all kinds of places. I mean, it's a very large area. Modern day warfare, any jet could go in there and drop a bunker buster, okay? But if you've got somebody who can call down fire from heaven, I'd like to see how you're going to get a jet close to it. Because you're not going to get it from the ground. And remember when Elijah, they come to get him, and these, it's 50 troops or a troop of 50, and he called down fire and burned them up, and then second troop showed up, he called down fire and burned them up, and the third, the guy got off and walked on his knees, because he knew, man, he was going to get burnt to a fare thee well. Well, that's Elijah being able to call that fire down and anybody shows up in the vicinity. I mean, just imagine the ability to just call fire down from heaven. All of a sudden you get these lightning strikes, and it doesn't matter whether it's a troop moving in on them or a jet plane. Modern warfare won't make any difference to Elijah if he's calling down fire from heaven, man. It'll destroy anything that gets near the place. That's how they're going to be protected for 42 months. I don't know how else they would be. Because there's, if there's not something to protect them from the air, it's obvious that we have jets now and bombers and everything else. But if you can't get close to it, it's like a no-fly zone. I don't know where I was at. Where did I leave off at? Let's see. Okay, here we go. Anyway, he talks about the munitions of rocks. I don't know if somehow these rocks all of a sudden propel themselves through the air. I don't know. It'll be pretty wild. But then the latter part of that verse, he says, and under it is turned up as it were fire. So out of the earth, out of the earth, or as for the earth, out of it cometh bread, and under it turneth up as it were fire. Well, the only thing I understand that is hell beneath your feet. It's hellfire. And there's something about that particular time frame before it says that hell is expanding, occasionally belching out fire from cracks and volcanoes, and actually even opening up and something coming out of it. We all know that from the book of Revelation. So I'll give you the two verses. You've heard them all before, but Isaiah 14:9 says, hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It hath raised up from their thrones all the kings of the nations. And of course, it's a picture of, I think, maybe Satan going into the bottomless pit. I don't know. Everybody's stirred up because here he comes. I mean, he's the reason they're there. Isaiah 5:14 says, therefore hell hath enlarged herself and opened her mouth without measure, and their glory and their multitude and their pomp, and he that rejoiceth shall descend into it. So that's the best I could do with that. In the worst, verse 6. The stones of it are the places of sapphires, and it hath dust of gold. On its face we mine for precious gems and metals from the rocks of the earth. It's kind of interesting that there's a mention of the stones of fire. And somehow verse 5 and 6 connected to the stones of fire located at one time on Mount Zion, but it looks like they've moved their residence. Ezekiel 28, verse 14 to 16. Go ahead and turn there. Ezekiel 28, verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now, I think this has to do with some type of angelic creature, maybe the angels themselves. They're the stones of fire. They're called, how does Revelation, Hebrews or Revelation says, ministering spirits, but something else about a flame of fire. I can't remember how that goes. Somebody find that for me. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence. Thou hast sinned, therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Now what's interesting, Ezekiel 28:13, thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering. The sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. And the workmanship of thy tabrets and thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. Okay. Huh? How's it read? His ministers a flame of fire, in reference to the angels. Is there a possibility that somebody else covered themselves with precious stones besides Lucifer? When it says every precious stone was thy covering. Maybe this was the thing, the fad, the garment of the day, to wear all those precious stones. I don't know, maybe especially the sapphire. Sapphire's blue, isn't it? I believe it's a blue stone. There's something to everything in here. I just don't know what it is. But he mentions sapphires and dust of gold. And I think it has reference to those, because he mentions the fire in verse 5. It says that under it is turned up as it were fire, the stones of it are the place of sapphires, and it hath dust of gold. Now there's something else here where this is leading into. And this was new to me, and I thought, wow, that's just, interesting. But verse 7 to 11 may explain verse 5 and 6 to some degree. It says, there is a path which no fowl knoweth, and which the vulture's eye hath not seen. The lion's whelps have not trodden it, nor the fierce lion passed by it. He putteth forth his hand upon the rock. He overturneth the mountains by the roots. He cutteth out rivers among the rocks, and his eye seeth every precious thing. And then verse 11, he bindeth the floods from overflowing, and the thing that is hid bringeth he forth to light. All right. One thing about the mountains here. According to the world, we have nearly exhausted the precious things of this world, like oil. Obviously, there's still quite a bit of oil out there, but they say we're going to get to the end of it. Minerals such as gold and silver and copper and you name it, magnesium, the whole bit, precious stones, gas deposits, rare earth metals, coal, and especially fresh water. These verses seem to indicate that there are mass deposits of precious things that are located at the very root of the mountains. Now think about it. I mean, we see them going into a coal mine, and they might go into a small little mountain. But have you seen mountain ranges? I mean, you've seen mountain ranges that man can't even go in there and get to it. And he says his eye seeth every precious thing. Okay, God's going to destroy the water that's on top. He's going to destroy the air. He's going to destroy the food and the crops, and every green thing's going to get eaten except for one little area. How in the world is God going to take care of the world if he's destroyed it? Because they haven't even got close to all the precious things. I mean, you think about a mountain and what's underneath it. How do you get underneath it? I mean, we cut through a little hill here and there at the top of a mountain but how often do we go through mountains? How often do we get to the base of a mountain, the root of a mountain, to see what's under it? Well, he says he just takes his hand. He putteth forth his hand upon the rock. He overturneth the mountains by the roots. And you know what's under there? There's rivers of water. There's gold. There's precious stones. There's probably oil. Everything that this world needs to live on will be provided. His eye seeth every precious thing. So man thinks, he's gotten to the end of it and he hasn't even got close. He thinks he's found it all. But good luck getting at it if you want to go for it. I mean, I'm telling you where it's at right now. But I mean, come on, have you ever just seen a mountain range? It's like, it's too formidable. You can't do it. You have to find it someplace else. Psalm 34:22, the Lord redeemeth the soul of his servants, and none of them that trust in him shall be desolate. I found that verse by accident. I looked at the wrong book. I was supposed to be looking at another verse, I believe, in Job or something, and I went to Psalms, and I said, well, that verse fits. The folks that are left here that survive, that go into the millennium, whatever God does, they're not going to be desolate. He turns the thing around, next thing you know, you got 4 crops, or at least you got the reaper or the sower overtaking the reaper and all that kind of thing. That's just going to be commonplace. There's going to be so much food. He's going to clean the air, clean the waters. And all of a sudden there's going to be this vast amount of stuff for people to take care of them. It said they trusted him that they'll not be desolate. It says here, Isaiah 35, verse 6, then shall the lame man leap as an hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing, for in the wilderness shall waters break out, and streams in the desert. So where from? Wherever he's got it hid. And he knows where it's hid. And it looks like it's under a lot of these mountains and stuff. Well, that's what you got. If you look at Israel, look in the desert. There's mountains in there in the Sinai desert, plenty of mountains. I mean, he goes up to Mount Ebal, and there's Mount Sinai, and there's mountain range through there. And you can't get under there to find out what's under there. God knows where everything's at. And he'll provide the needs of everyone just because he could just take his hand and break it down to the roots and say, there you go, all the water you'll need for 1,000 years. It says his eye seeth. 2 Chronicles 16:9, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth, to show himself strong on the behalf of them whose heart is perfect toward him. Herein thou hast done foolishly, therefore from henceforth thou shalt have wars. The Lord's going to show himself strong. We're not going to devastate this planet environmentally, and then all of a sudden the Lord goes, like, I don't know what to do about it. We got all kinds of politicians that are doing that. They don't know what to do about it. He'll know exactly what to do about it and provide everyone's needs. So, that's verse 7 to 10, where he talks about cutting out the rivers among the rocks. His eye seeth every precious thing. Then verse 11 kind of jumps a few billion light years. He bindeth the floods from overflowing. The thing that is hid bringeth he forth to light. Well, we saw that earlier, where he talks about binding those waters. And he's talking about the great deep. So, and Job speaks of this quite often. This massive reservoir of water is held in place by the power of God to not flood the earth again. That's what we've been told. His words literally bind those waters into place. Yet there is something hidden within the water that will be brought forth to light. Well, Dr. Ruckman gave Luke 12:2, says, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. There are occupants in that water. We know for one for sure is Leviathan. We're going to cover that in Job 41. And he is in that deep. I'm talking about a physical representation of himself. Okay? But there are occupants in that body of water who will be brought forth into the light to face God's judgment. Revelation 20:13 says, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it. Something's up there. I mean, he talks about, and there was no more sea, and he's talking about that great deep after he creates the new heaven and new earth, and there was no more sea. He's talking about that body of water up there. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it. Well, you know there's no men up there. We can't make it up there. Unless Enoch didn't make it through and he's not spending the day with God, he drowned. I mean, other than that, who could it be? It could be beings that appear as men. And it could be quite a few occupants in there, but one for sure that he's going to bring to light. So that's the best I can do with that passage of Scripture. Anybody got anything? The Lord show you anything? It's rough, man. I'm hoping the rest of the chapter is not as bad as this, but yeah. Be thou removed, yeah. Yeah, that'll fit too. Yeah. And why, you're asking yourself, why would you say to a mountain, be thou removed, though? And now you know that there's something hidden underneath it.
When would you say it? I mean, we don't say it now.
Yeah, we don't say it now. Well, you would say it, if you said it when the Lord come back. Now that's crazy. But you know what? If when the Lord comes back, and you had faith as a grain of mustard seed and said, Lord, remove this mountain, and the Lord just takes it and just removes it. He talks about leveling mountains too in the tribulation, or at his second advent. He talks about leveling mountains. So that may be when a lot of those mountains are exposed at the root, is when he comes back, and you find instant relief for those that survive and those that make it into the millennium. So, yeah, that's a good verse. Anybody else got a verse? Okay. I looked at it, when I first read it, I went,